Have you ever wondered why some developers can outbid you by 900K and still walk away with a larger margin? It comes down to hidden dials in your feasibility model that almost everyone leaves untouched. Now, I'm going to show you the most impactful dials to your development, exactly where they are, and how each one can shift your profit by six figures or more, and how you can automate this entire process using AI. And if you don't know who I am, I'm Toby, and over 15 years, I've delivered over $19 billion of real estate projects worldwide. And I now work directly with clients to help them become AI power users to automate their workflows so they can focus on the things that matter, like their strategy and building career defining projects. So, before we jump into it, first of all, what is a micro dial? When I say micro dial, I mean one specific input cell inside of feasibility that most developers either leave on default or didn't even know was in the model, or worse, the model's not even accounting for. It's not the obvious stuff like land price or build cost. It's the much smaller assumptions, things like efficiency, timing, absorption, payment schedules, interest mechanics, the things that sit quietly in the model and drive the results. On their own, each one looks minor, but when you stack a few of them together, you can move the GDV, the interest, the residual land value by six to seven figures without changing the fundamentals of the entire development. And that's the gap. If your model doesn't expose these as controllable inputs, you're not underwriting. You're basically accepting a default deal and hoping that it holds up. So now you know what a micro dial is. Let's discuss one of the biggest dials that any apartment scheme can look to progress. Dial one is building efficiency, your gross floor area to net internal area. Basically, how much of what you build is actually sellable area, which is why a tiny change here can move your GDV without ever touching build cost. Let me show you exactly where this sits in the model and what happens when you nudge it ever so slightly. So here I am in my automated appraisal model that allows me to run end-to-end appraisals on any project in 15 minutes. Now, specifically, we're going to go to the spatial tab, which tells us from our entire land area how much GFA can be apportioned to apartments. What we're going to be seeing here is our apartments at the moment is 65% in terms of its efficiency. This was a development that had a multifamily asset in and needed a lot of front of house. And if we quickly jump into our GDV, we can see that the sum total at the moment now is sitting around 27 million pounds. Now, watch what happens when I move the efficiency on the unit number as well to 74 as a ratio. As you can see, we move it to 74%, we get more units, and as a result, we now have closer to 28 million in terms of GDV, gross development value, because we just turned circular and dead space into sellable net area. In this deal, that's roughly 320 square meters of extra sellable area. So at £3,000 a square meter, it's about 900 grand in additional GDV with zero added build costs. And here's the uncomfortable bit. A lot of feasibility templates don't even give you this as a clean input. If you can't test the efficiency properly, you're leaving six of seven figures on the table in every single deal without any visibility on what you're actually building out. Okay, the first dial changed how much of the building you can actually sell. The next dial doesn't change the building at all. It changes when you pay for the land. And that one detail can completely change how much cash you need up front and what impact that has on returns. So, land payment timing is the schedule for paying the seller and pushing part of the payment to a later date to reduce the upfront cash you need on day one, which can significantly cut your overall finance cost as well. Before we head to our config tab, what we have here and the numbers we need to pay attention to is our project internal rate of return, land payment currently coming out as nearly £3 million in month one and giving us a total cash flow drawdown for that month of 3 million. So if we go into our config tab, which this is where we have every single micro detail that could possibly impact our model, which then cascades throughout the entire document, we will go down to our land acquisition area. And at the moment, you can see 100% of the payment is due on month one. But what if we say that the deposit is going to be 50% and the balance is going to be paid on, say, month 12. Well, what does that do to our IRR and those metrics we saw? Great. Now you can see that the IRR has gone up by 1%, which is huge, just for that small change, that small negotiation item. And in terms of our cash flow, great. You can see the month one has almost halved, and now our catch up payment is in month 12. So by paying less upfront, you typically borrow less for less time, which means lower interest costs. And lower interest costs drop your total costs, which is just another one of the dials that can lift your margin and not just your IRR. So once again, you haven't changed the sales price, the build cost, or the design. You've just stopped the model assuming the worst case land payment timing by default and structured a more profitable deal for yourself. Now, this next point is the residual land value back solving. Now, my clients know that I hate talking about this next part because I genuinely believe you should never touch your margin just to win a deal. I'm going to show you the reality of what's happening in the market and why developers who can model properly can sometimes get away with being a little bit more reckless. Now, let's stack the dials that we've just touched and see what that does to the maximum land price that our deal can support. And in order to do that, we have to go to our residual land value solving tab. And we can see at the moment our margin is set to 18%. So, given our total value, our total cost, and our targeted margin of 18% being 5 million, that from the total value, we can afford to pay 2.9 in residual land value. But what happens if we go to our config screen and we say, right, the hurdle we actually need to aim for, our board are being very generous this year, is actually only 16%. What does that do? Well, now that our total profit that we need to take has reduced, we can actually bid more for the land, quite considerably more for the land as well. And that's how people stay competitive in this market. But the issue is, I don't see it as a point of being, a race to the bottom. Yeah, I'm saying that 16% can be a real margin if the rest of your model is incredibly rigorous, proper timings, proper finance, realistic inputs, and you've stress tested every single assumption. For me personally, 23% is my area of comfort, and anything below that needs to be significantly justified. When the model is tight, you don't need to hide behind a big margin and substitute for uncertainty. The rigor earns you the right to be more precise, and that precision is what lets you compete. Now, here's the real problem. What we've discussed today is just a few of the micro dials. My feasibility in the config tab, as you've seen, it has 50, probably maybe nearly 100 of these micro dials that we can adjust. So the question isn't then, can I tweak inputs? The question is, how do you find the highest impact dials and fast? And how do you test them in seconds, not hours, without missing anything critical? This is where AI becomes unbelievably useful. Every dial we've touched today can be identified, tested, and prioritized using AI. Not in the vague AI will change the world, but inside the actual spreadsheet. You can create a custom skill so Claude can read the model and figure out which inputs drive the outputs the most and give you a short list on what's actually worth testing. So you're not randomly just clicking cells and hoping that you've found the right lever. And this is the key. AI only becomes powerful when it understands your system. So I've built this feasibility that I personalize for all of my clients so the logic is consistent. Then we give our clients our pre-built custom Claude prompts tailored for their personal model. So Claude already knows where to look, which input it needs to control, and how to interpret the results. So what does that look like on actual screen? So here I can add into this our latest model that we're just playing on at the moment, and I can forward slash my skill. I think I called it feasibility, precision feasibility improver. And I can say, review my feasibility and provide me 20 areas that I can make a betterment on my assumptions. Specifically, I don't want anything too overly ambitious. I just want to really target and identify where my improvement and my efficiencies can be made across all of the feasibility items. Give me 10 to 20 different options that I can review. Then we're just going to let that cycle through. You can see that's whirling, it's accessing the skill, it's looking at the development model that we've provided it. Okay, so what it's done is it's Read through the skill, it understands what it needs to do. It's now looking through the model. Okay, here we go. It's got a clear picture of the model, and it can see that this is a development in Essex with an apartment led scheme. Okay, it looks like it has returned us something back in terms of its analysis. So let's take a quick look in the side panel here on what it's provided us. Great. This is how our reports usually look. Yeah, as you can see, what it's done is it has analyzed the overall model. It's told us what our GDV is, what our margin is, and what our land values are at the moment. And then items it's highlighted is the apartment, and specifically it says it thinks that given the data in the project area, because with our skills we teach it to analyze all of the project data for our comparables nearby. Depending on where our development is, it says we're actually quite light in the sales values that we've put in, i.e., we're at 3,000 per square meter. We could probably go between 4.5 to 6,000. Okay, loads of space there, loads of headroom. Same thing for townhouses. Build rate, it says we might want to look at the BCIS, which is the build cost indices, which is the database across the UK for median build cost, is saying that actually for development similar to this, we're probably a bit light, so we need to analyze that and get a pre-tender estimate. Good to know. Balcony allocations, is it relevant for the area? Can you take out the balconies, reduce build cost? Yeah, good idea. Land payment structures, it's got in there again. So as you can see, without going through this step by step, you can see that this is when it stops making AI and Claude a chatbot and starts acting like it's your co-analyst. It flags things like sensitivity and it suggests scenarios and it helps you run a rigorous stress test in minutes, not hours. And it's definitely not after the stakeholder has already found holes in your numbers. A repeatable feasibility template that AI can understand isn't a nice to have anymore. It's where the entire industry and underwriting is going. And if you want the model that I'm using or have used in this video, plus the AI prompts that plug straight into it, there's a link in our description to get access to all of that information. And if you want me to break down exactly how to write prompts that are specific to your deal and your process and your project, then watch this next video here.